The hospital smell of antiseptic and bleach made my stomach turn as I fumbled with my phone. Fingers still clumsy from the anesthesia wearing off. 3 days post-surgery, and the screen kept blurring in and out of focus. I blinked hard, trying to clear my vision, then saw it. An email with a subject line that made my heart stop. Leadership transition, effective immediately. I read it once. Then again. Certainly the pain medication was playing tricks on my mind. Due to operational demands during your extended medical absence, we have made the decision to restructure leadership in the Product Innovation Division. Marcus Chen will assume the role of Chief Product Officer, effective today. We appreciate your contributions and look forward to discussing your transition upon your return. Marcus Chen, my former junior strategist. The same Marcus I'd mentored through every critical product launch for the past 18 months. The same Marcus who was now sitting in my office using my title, leading my team, while I was lying in a hospital bed with surgical staples, holding my abdomen together. My laptop sat on the rolling table beside me, and I pulled it closer despite the sharp pain that shot through my midsection. The surgeon had been clear. 6 weeks minimum recovery. No lifting, no stress, no returning to work. I'd promised my wife, Claire, I would actually rest this time, actually let my body heal instead of answering Slack messages from the recovery room like I'd done during my appendectomy 3 years ago. I looked at Claire asleep in the chair beside my bed. She'd been here for 3 straight nights, leaving only to check on our daughter Emma. Her face was drawn with exhaustion, worry lines deeper than they'd been a week ago. She'd begged me to turn off my phone to focus on healing. And here I was, staring at my professional obituary. I closed the laptop carefully, my hands trembling. Then I made 3 decisions that would change everything. I would follow the doctor's orders to the letter. I would document every single thing that happened. And I would not confront anyone publicly until I understood exactly how deep this betrayal went. Before I tell you what unfolded over the next 6 weeks, I need you to understand something. This isn't just a story about workplace betrayal. It's about what happens when taking care of your health becomes a liability. When being human enough to need surgery makes you disposable. When the systems designed to protect you become weapons in someone else's hands. If you've ever been replaced, pushed aside, or punished for being vulnerable, stay with me. Because what they didn't know was that I'd been building protections for years. Not because I was paranoid, but because I'd watched it happen to someone I loved. And I'd sworn it would never happen to me. My name is Sarah Morgan, and until that email arrived, I was the Chief Product Officer at Titan Dynamics, a technology company that had grown from a scrappy startup to an industry contender in 7 years. I built that product division from nothing. When I joined, we had 3 products and $12 million in annual revenue. By the time I was wheeled into surgery, we had 17 products and $230 million in revenue. I'm methodical by nature. Some people call it obsessive. My team used to joke that I probably had spreadsheets tracking my spreadsheets. They weren't wrong. I documented everything. Every product roadmap, every strategic decision, every performance metric, every meeting outcome. Not because I was covering myself, but because I genuinely believed in building systems that could function without any single person becoming a bottleneck. That philosophy was about to save my career. I grew up watching my mother fight a battle she should never have had to fight. She was a nurse practitioner, brilliant and dedicated, with 24 years at the same hospital system. Then she was diagnosed with breast cancer. Stage 2. Caught early, excellent prognosis with treatment. She took 12 weeks of FMLA leave for surgery, chemotherapy, and recovery. All legally protected. All properly documented. When she returned to work, her position had been restructured. She was offered a role with lower pay, worse hours, and half the responsibilities. They couldn't fire her outright because of federal protections and her union, but they made her professional life so unbearable that she took early retirement at 56. I was 15 years old watching my mother cry at our kitchen table, her expertise and decades of service reduced to nothing because she'd been human enough to get sick. I promised myself it would never happen to me. I'd build so much value, create such undeniable impact, that I'd be irreplaceable. I was wrong about what mattered. When I joined Titan Dynamics 5 years ago, the company was hemorrhaging talent and losing market share. The CEO, Richard Voss, hired me specifically to turn around our flailing product division. "Your reputation for building high-performing teams precedes you," he'd said during my final interview, his smile warm and genuine. "We need someone who can create structures that endure." For 5 years, that's exactly what I did. I hired strategically, mentored intentionally, and built processes that allowed us to launch products faster and more successfully than anyone else in our sector. I worked 16-hour days during critical launches. I flew to Seoul, Singapore, and Stockholm to close partnerships. I missed Emma's 8th birthday because I was negotiating a $40 million contract in Berlin. Claire had been understanding. Patient. Until she wasn't. "Emma asked me yesterday why you love work more than you love her," she'd said 6 months ago, her voice quiet but firm. And I didn't have a good answer, Sarah. Because lately I'd been wondering the same thing. That conversation had shaken me. I'd started setting better boundaries, leaving work at reasonable hours, being present for family dinners. I thought I was finally finding balance. Then came the tumor. I discovered it myself, actually, a persistent ache in my lower abdomen that wouldn't go away. My doctor found it during an ultrasound, a mass on my left ovary that needed immediate removal. "Probably benign," she said, "but we want no get and biopsy." The surgery itself is straightforward, but you'll need 6 weeks to recover properly. 6 weeks? It seemed like forever, and no time at all. I informed Richard personally, 2 weeks. Before my scheduled surgery date, I prepared extensive documentation for my leadership team. I created contingency protocols for every active project. I recorded video walkthroughs of strategic decisions and quarterly goals. I even wrote detailed notes on team dynamics and who would need extra support during my absence. "That's fine, Sarah," Richard had said, barely glancing up from his phone. "Take whatever time you need. Marcus can handle day-to-day operations while you're out." I should have heard the dismissiveness in his tone. I should have noticed he didn't ask about my prognosis, didn't inquire about the surgery details, didn't show even basic human concern. I should have questioned why his face had brightened slightly when I mentioned the 6-week timeline. The surgery went well, technically. The tumor was benign, thank God. But I'd lost more blood than expected during the procedure, which meant my recovery would be slower, more painful. The surgeon had been apologetic but clear. "No work for at least 6 weeks. Your body needs to heal. If you push too hard too fast, you risk serious complications." I woke up in recovery to Claire's tear-streaked face, and Emma holding my hand, her eyes wide with worry. "You scared us, Mom," Emma whispered. She was 13, old enough to understand what cancer could have meant, young enough to still need reassurance that I'd be okay. For 3 days, I did exactly what the doctors ordered. I rested. I let Claire take care of me. I turned off my work phone and focused on healing. That was my critical mistake. On day 4, when I finally powered on my laptop to check if anything urgent had come up, I found the leadership transition email. But beneath it, buried in a thread I'd been CC'd on by accident, was something that made my blood run cold. An email chain between Marcus and Richard, dated from 8 days before my surgery. "Marcus Chen, once Sarah's out for the procedure, I think we have our optimal window. The team's already comfortable with my leadership from when she took vacation last quarter." Richard Voss agreed. "We'll frame it as temporary coverage initially then. Formalize the permanent transition while she's in recovery. By the time she's back on her feet, it'll be a done deal. Structure the announcement to emphasize continuity and minimal disruption." "Marcus Chen, what about the board?" "Sarah has strong advocates there, particularly Patricia Chen." Richard Voss, "Leave the board to me. They care about quarterly results, not individual personalities. Besides, We'll present it as an operational decision within my authority. Marcus Chen. Understood. I'll have my transition plan ready to go. I read it 3 times, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the laptop. This wasn't opportunism. This wasn't taking advantage of an unexpected situation. This was calculated, premeditated replacement. They'd planned to eliminate me before I'd even been wheeled into the operating room, timing it deliberately to exploit my medical vulnerability. I reached for my phone to call Richard, fury rising in my throat like bile. Then I stopped. Confronting them now from a hospital bed, while I was still medicated and weak, would accomplish nothing. I was in no position to fight. They knew it. That's why they'd moved so quickly. I needed to think, like the strategist I was. Methodically, carefully, ruthlessly. I opened a new document and titled it simply, Timeline. Then, I began documenting everything with timestamps, screenshots, exact quotes. The date I'd informed Richard about my surgery. His response, word for word. The email chain showing premeditation. The announcement timing. Everything. When Claire woke up an hour later, she found me typing slowly, carefully managing the pain in my abdomen with each keystroke. "Sarah," she said, her voice carrying a warning. "What are you doing?" "Documenting," I replied without looking up. "There's a difference between working and protecting yourself." She came to sit on the edge of the bed, studying my face. "What happened?" I showed her the emails. Watched her expression shift from confusion to shock to pure rage. "They replaced you while you were unconscious?" Her voice was dangerously quiet. "While you were having surgery. They're calling it a transition," I said, hearing the bitterness in my own voice. "Effective immediately. This is illegal, Sarah. You're on protected medical leave. You should call a lawyer right now." "I will," I said. "But first, I need to understand the full picture. This feels bigger than just me." She studied me for a long moment. "You're going to fight this." "I'm going to document this," I corrected. "And then I'm going to dismantle it piece by piece." That night, after Claire had gone home to check on Emma, I did something that would have horrified my former self. I accessed Titan's internal systems using my still active credentials and began systematically downloading files. Not to steal anything, not to sabotage, but to preserve evidence of what I'd built, because I had a sinking feeling they were going to try to erase my contributions entirely. Every product strategy document I'd authored, every performance review I'd written, every email thread showing my decision-making and the results it generated. Every piece of evidence proving that the division's success was directly traceable to my leadership. I saved everything to a secure personal cloud storage they couldn't access. Then I started cross-referencing patterns. Who had been promoted when? Which initiatives had succeeded or failed under whose leadership? Which executives had a track record of taking credit for work they hadn't done? And that's when I found it. The pattern that explained everything. Over the past 4 years, 5 senior leaders at Titan had left the company within 6 months of returning from extended medical or parental leave. Resign. Pulled up their LinkedIn profiles, read their exit interviews from Glassdoor, cross-referenced with SEC filings about executive changes. All 5 were women. All 5 had been replaced by men, primarily Richard's protégés. All 5 had been told initially that the replacement was temporary coverage, only to find it made permanent while they were still on leave. I was looking at systematic exploitation disguised as operational necessity. And every single instance had Richard Voss's fingerprints on it. By the time I was discharged from the hospital 5 days later, moving slowly and carefully, with Claire supporting me, I had something more valuable than anger. I had documentation. And I had a strategy. The first 2 weeks of recovery at home were physically excruciating but mentally clarifying. I could barely walk to the bathroom without getting winded. Couldn't lift anything heavier than my laptop. Couldn't sleep through the night because of pain. But I could think. And I could continue building my case. I received exactly 2 communications from Titan during this time. An automated email about benefits continuation during medical leave, and a brief, patronizing message from Marcus. Hope you're recovering well. Don't worry about anything here. We've got everything under control. Focus on getting better. The subtext was clear as glass. We don't need you anymore. What they didn't know was that I'd begun reaching out through careful back channels. Not directly, not in ways they could trace, but strategically. I scheduled a video call with Patricia Chen, the board member who championed my promotion to CPO 3 years ago. She'd been a mentor of sorts, one of the few women in Titan's leadership circles who'd broken through the glass ceiling before it became trendy to talk about. Sarah? Her face lit up when the video connected. How are you feeling? We were all so worried when we heard about your surgery. Thank you, Patricia. I appreciate that. I paused, deliberately, watching her expression. I wanted to get your perspective on something. The announcement about Marcus taking over as CPO. Was that discussed at the board level? Her smile faltered. What announcement? The email that went out 3 days after. My surgery. Marcus Chen is now listed as Chief Product Officer on the executive team page. I watched the emotions cycle across Patricia's face. Confusion, shock, then cold, calculated anger. Sarah, I'm going to need to call you back. That decision was never brought to the board. C-suite transitions require board approval per our governance charter. After she disconnected, I sat back carefully in my desk chair, managing the pull of the surgical staples in my abdomen. I'd just confirmed something critical. Richard had violated company governance protocols, acting unilaterally on a decision that required board oversight. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Emergency board meeting scheduled for next week. Can you attend via video if your health permits? Your insights would be valuable. I replied immediately. I'll be there. Week 3 of my recovery. The cracks in Marcus's leadership started showing publicly. I began receiving messages from former colleagues. Casual check-ins that revealed far more than their senders probably intended. Sarah, product marketing lead. Hey, hope you're healing up. Things are interesting here. Marcus has some big ideas about new direction, but it mostly sounds like your strategies with different buzzwords. Miss having you around. Dev, engineering VP, random question. But do you remember why we specifically chose the Cascade architecture for the Morrison project? Marcus wants to change it, and I'm trying to explain why that's a terrible idea. But I can't find the original decision documentation. Keisha, analytics director, just checking in. Some of us are keeping detailed notes about what's happening. Let me know if you need anything. That last message made me sit up straighter, despite the pain it caused. Keisha was politically astute and exceptionally careful. If she was keeping notes, she'd witnessed something worth documenting. I replied, I'd love to catch up when I'm feeling stronger. Always helpful to understand how things are evolving. Her response came within 5 minutes. Anytime. For what it's worth, a lot of us don't think this was handled right. At all. By week 4, I was mobile enough to work from my home office for a few hours each day. I used that time to build something I'd been planning since the hospital. A comprehensive performance analysis of Titan's product division. Every product launch for the past 5 years, broken down by quarter, by revenue impact, by customer satisfaction metrics, by on-time delivery rates, and most importantly, by who had led the strategic decisions. The data told an undeniable story. Products where I'd personally led strategy had a 92% success rate in meeting or exceeding launch targets. Products where I'd delegated to team members I'd trained showed an 87% success rate. Products where Richard or other executives had overridden my recommendations showed a 63% success rate. But here was the most damning pattern. In the 4 weeks since Marcus had taken over my role, 3 senior product managers had submitted resignation letters. All 3 were women I'd personally hired and mentored. All 3 had attached their resignations to detailed documentation of hostile work environment and systematic dismissal of expertise. I read their resignation letters with growing fury. Marcus had apparently held a team meeting where he'd announced that the division needed more aggressive leadership and that collaborative approaches had held us back from achieving our full potential. He'd specifically singled out the women on the team for being too consensus-driven and needing to think more strategically. In other words, he'd basically called me weak and called them weak by association. That same week, disaster struck one of our flagship products. The Morrison platform, our highest revenue product, experienced a critical failure during a scheduled update. The system went down for 16 hours, costing our clients millions in downtime. I watched it unfold from my home office, monitoring our internal Slack channels. Marcus had ordered the engineering team to push through an architecture change over dev's strong objections. The exact architecture change I'd explicitly ruled out 8 months ago because our stress testing had shown it would create a single point of failure. I documented that decision. Of course I had, including the test results showing why the alternative approach was dangerous. Marcus hadn't bothered to read the documentation. As the crisis escalated and clients started threatening to pull their contracts, I received a phone call from an unknown number. Ms. Morgan, this is Jennifer Howe from Titan Dynamics Board of Directors. Patricia Chen suggested I reach out to you directly. Jennifer was the audit committee chair. This was significant. I'm glad you called, I said carefully. I've been reviewing some concerning information about executive transitions during your medical leave. Would you be willing to walk me through your understanding of what occurred? For the next 45 minutes, I shared everything. The timeline of events. The forwarded email chain showing premeditation. The pattern of 5 previous women executives replaced during protected leave. The performance data showing early destabilization under Marcus's leadership. The resignation letters from 3 senior managers citing hostile environment. Why? Jennifer listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long pause. Ms. Morgan, I'm going to be direct with you. The board was never informed that your position was being made permanently vacant. We were told you'd be on temporary medical leave with Marcus serving as interim coverage. What you're describing represents serious governance violations at minimum. Potentially federal employment law violations. I'm not interested in suing the company, I said carefully. I'm interested in ensuring the product division I built doesn't collapse, and ensuring this doesn't happen to anyone else. Understood. The board is meeting in 3 days. I'd like you to present what you've shared with me. Can you do that remotely? Yes, I'll be there. Yes, I'll be there. After we disconnected, I sat in my home office, staring at the wall. My abdomen ached. I was exhausted. But, for the first time since that email had arrived, I felt something shift. The momentum was changing. The board meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m., exactly 5 weeks after my surgery. I was cleared to work from home part-time by this point, though still not approved for return to office. Claire helped me set up my laptop and external camera in my home office, testing the connection multiple times. She brought me tea and pain medication, studying my face with concern. You don't have to do this yet, she said quietly. You're still healing. They did this while I was recovering, I replied. If I wait until I'm fully healed, the division will be too damaged to save. When I logged into the video conference at 1:55 p.m., I could see the board members assembling in the main conference room. Patricia gave me a small, encouraging nod. Jennifer was reviewing documents at the head of the table. Richard sat to her right, his expression carefully neutral. Marcus was not present. Interesting. Thank you all for attending. Jennifer began precisely at 2 p.m. We have several urgent governance matters to address. The first concerns executive transitions that were apparently made without proper board review. Richard's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. Sarah Morgan has joined us remotely to provide context. Sarah, would you walk us through the events surrounding your medical leave and the leadership changes that occurred? I did so methodically. I kept my voice steady, my presentation factual. I showed them the timeline, the premeditated email chain, the pattern of 5 previous women executives, the performance data showing the division's destabilization. The resignation letters from 3 senior managers explicitly citing Marcus's comments about women being too collaborative. When I finished, Jennifer turned to Richard. Can you explain why a permanent C-suite leadership change was executed without board approval? Richard's response was smooth, practiced. The situation was intended to be temporary initially. However, given operational demands and Marcus's strong interim performance, we determined it was in the company's best interest to formalize the transition. I planned to seek board ratification at this meeting, but you announced it publicly 3 days after Sarah's surgery, Patricia interjected, her voice sharp, before you could possibly have performance data from Marcus's interim leadership, before Sarah was even discharged from the hospital. How do you justify that timeline? Marcus had already demonstrated leadership capability during Sarah's previous absences, Richard replied. I unmuted my microphone. Richard, what previous absences are you referring to? I've taken exactly 6 days of vacation in the past 2 years, all planned months in advance with full delegation protocols. There has been no extended absence prior to my surgery. Silence fell over the room. Richard shifted in his chair. I'm speaking more broadly about delegation, patterns, and operational readiness. Then let's talk about patterns, I said, pulling up a slide I'd prepared. Over the past 4 years, 5 senior women leaders have left Titan within 6 months of returning from extended medical or parental leave. All were replaced by male executives, primarily your mentees, Richard. In each case, the replacement was announced as temporary during the woman's absence, then quietly made permanent. In each case, you described it as an operational decision that didn't require board review. I watched the board members begin flipping through packets in front of them, documents Jennifer had clearly distributed before the meeting. Sarah, where did you compile this information? Jennifer asked. Public records primarily. LinkedIn profiles, Glassdoor, reviews, SEC executive transition filings. The pattern isn't hidden if you know to look for it. I've also included affidavits from 3 of those 5 women describing their experiences. They've agreed to speak with the board if needed. Patricia spoke up, her voice cold. Jennifer, I move that we continue this discussion in executive session without management present. Richard started to object, then seemed to recalculate. Of course. I'm happy to step out while the board deliberates. Actually, Jennifer said carefully, since Sarah is technically on medical leave rather than active management, I'd like her to remain available for questions. Richard, please wait in the side conference room. I watched Richard's face go through several emotions before he stood. Hi. Left without another word. The door closed behind him with a definitive click. For the next 90 minutes, the board asked me questions. About divisional performance. About team dynamics. About the specific circumstances of my replacement. About the Morrison platform failure that had happened on Marcus's watch. They were thorough. Occasionally uncomfortable. But fundamentally fair. Finally, Jennifer muted my line for a private board discussion. 5 minutes later, my audio returned. Sarah, the board has serious concerns about how this situation was handled. We're commissioning a full investigation, which will take approximately 2 weeks. In the meantime, we need to clarify your status. Would you be willing to return to active work, reporting directly to the board during the investigation? Period. What happens to Marcus? I asked. Marcus will return to his previous position as Senior Product Strategist, effective immediately. We'll frame it publicly as completing the interim coverage now that you've been cleared to return. I took a careful breath, managing the pain from my still healing incision. I appreciate the board's confidence. But I have conditions. Jennifer's eyebrows rose, which are, first, I want a comprehensive audit of how medical and parental leave has been handled for all employees, with specific attention to gender disparities in leadership transitions. Second, I want the 3 product managers who resigned reinstated if they're willing to return, with promotions and compensation reflecting their actual contributions. Third, I want a clear governance protocol established to prevent any executive from making unilateral C-suite decisions again. I paused, then added the most important condition. And fourth, I wanted acknowledged internally and externally that I never actually left. That my position was never legitimately vacant. That this situation was corrected, not rationalized. The board members exchanged glances. Patricia was smiling. "Those are reasonable requests," Jennifer said. "The board agrees to all 4 conditions." She extended her hand toward the camera, a symbolic gesture. "Welcome back, Sarah." Officially. After the meeting ended, I sat alone in my home office. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt exhausted. Vindicated, perhaps, but mostly just tired. The fight wasn't over. The investigation would take time, but I'd done something important. I'd refused to disappear quietly. My phone buzzed with a text from Keisha. Marcus just sent a division-wide email about transitioning back to his strategic role to focus on high-value initiatives. We all know what that means. Welcome back. I smiled despite the ache in my abdomen. Thanks. See you Monday. That weekend, Claire insisted we celebrate. Nothing elaborate, just dinner at home with Emma. Claire made my favorite pasta dish. Emma had apparently been monitoring the situation more closely than I'd realized. "So you're keeping your job?" she asked over dinner, direct in that teenage way. "I am," I confirmed. "Good. It would have been really unfair if they fired you for being sick. They didn't fire me, sweetie. They just restructured." "That's corporate speak for firing you and hoping you don't fight back," Emma said flatly. "We discussed it in my social studies class. Companies do it all the time to people who get sick or have babies." Claire and I exchanged glances. Our 13-year-old had a better grasp on workplace discrimination than most adults. "You're right," I admitted. "That is what happened. And it wasn't fair. But I documented everything and presented facts to people who had the power to fix it." "Did you cry?" Emma asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. "When? When you found out they replaced you? Did you cry?" I thought about it honestly. No. I was too angry. And then I got strategic. "Yes, yeah." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "That's better than crying. Crying doesn't fix anything. Crying can be healing," Claire interjected gently. "There's no shame in it." "But Mom didn't need healing," Emma said. "She needed revenge." "Not revenge," I corrected. "Justice. There's a difference." On Monday morning, I logged into Titan's systems for my first official day back. My inbox had 437 unread emails. I ignored most of them and scheduled a video call with my entire product management team. When their faces appeared on my screen, I saw relief mixed with caution. Sarah was smiling. Dev looked exhausted. Keisha's expression was carefully neutral. "I know the past 5 weeks have been difficult," I began. "I want to be transparent. The board is investigating how my medical leave was handled. I'm back in an active role, reporting directly to them during this process. More importantly, I want to understand what you experienced while I was gone." For the next hour, they talked about confusion, about strategic reversals that contradicted established plans, about feeling like their expertise was suddenly being questioned or dismissed. Sarah mentioned that Marcus had tried to take credit for a product launch she'd led entirely by herself. Dev explained that engineering timelines had been compressed without consulting the teams actually doing the work. A meeting in week 3 where he basically said the division had been too collaborative under your leadership. He specifically said women in product roles tend to be too consensus-driven, and that we needed to be more decisive and aggressive. Some of us felt like he was saying you were weak, and by extension, so were we. The silence that followed was heavy. "Here's what I need," I said finally. "Document everything that happened in the past 5 weeks. Every decision that confused you. Every strategic change that wasn't properly explained. Every comment that felt inappropriate. Not for retaliation, but because the board needs to understand the operational and cultural impact of what occurred." After the call ended, I sat back carefully. My incision site ached. I was more tired than I'd been since leaving the hospital. But something had shifted. My team was still here. Still committed. That mattered more than titles or vindication. Over the next 2 weeks, the board's investigation expanded. They interviewed team members, reviewed performance data, examined the pattern I'd identified of systematic replacement during protected leave. They brought in an external firm to conduct culture and gender equity assessments. Richard avoided me entirely. Marcus sent one carefully worded email that read, like it had been written by a lawyer. I didn't respond. The 3 senior product managers who'd resigned? 2 of them withdrew their resignations after conversations with Jennifer about the transitional situation and their career trajectories under my restored leadership. The 3rd, Amanda, chose to leave anyway, but for a promotion at another company. I'm grateful you fought this, she told me over coffee. But I need a fresh start somewhere that didn't make me feel invisible. I understood completely. On day 13 of my return, Jennifer called me directly. Sarah, the board has completed its investigation. We'd like to meet with you tomorrow in person if you're cleared for it. I am, I said. My surgeon had approved my return to office the previous week, with accommodations for frequent breaks. Good. 10 a.m. in the executive boardroom. The next morning, I dressed carefully. First time wearing a structured blazer since surgery, and the fabric felt strange against my still tender abdomen. Claire helped me with the zipper, her hands gentle. Whatever happens, we'll be fine, she said firmly. You've already won the important part. When I walked into Titan's building, I moved slowly, carefully. The security guard, Marcus, did a double take. Ms. Morgan, welcome back. He seemed genuinely happy to see me. Thank you, Marcus. Good to be back. I took the elevator to the executive floor. Each step still required conscious management of discomfort, but I was stronger than I'd been 5 weeks ago. The boardroom door was open when I arrived. The full board was assembled. 9 people seated around the table. Jennifer at the head. Patricia, to her right. Richard was notably absent. Sarah, thank you for coming, Jennifer said, gesturing to a seat. I'll be direct. Our investigation uncovered systematic governance violations and what amounts to discrimination based on medical leave status and gender. Richard Voss repeatedly bypassed required board approvals for executive transitions, particularly targeting women leaders during protected leave periods. She slid a thick folder across the table. This is the full report. The summary is that Richard violated company policy, board governance protocols, and potentially federal employment protections. Similar patterns occurred with 4 other women executives over 3 years. I opened the folder. The documentation was comprehensive. Damning. What? Where is Richard? I asked. He resigned this morning, Patricia said. The board accepted it immediately. The room fell quiet. I processed this information with surprising detachment. We have an offer for you, Sarah, Jennifer continued. First option, return to your role as Chief Product Officer with full acknowledgement that you never legitimately vacated it. Second option, given everything that's occurred, we'd understand if you preferred to negotiate an exit package. Patricia leaned forward. There's a third option, interim CEO while we conduct a search for Richard's replacement. Your leadership during this crisis demonstrated capabilities well beyond product management. I looked around the table. Good people, mostly. People who'd let one charismatic executive create a toxic pattern because they hadn't been paying attention. That needed to be said. I appreciate your confidence in all 3 options, I said, carefully. But I'm going to decline the CEO role. I'm a product leader. That's where my skills and passion align. However, I have conditions for returning as CPO. Jennifer gestured for me to continue. First, formal board oversight of all executive transitions, with explicit protocols preventing unilateral action. Second, the 2 product managers who withdrew their resignations get promoted with compensation, reflecting their actual value. Third, comprehensive culture, audit with specific focus on gender equity, medical leave handling, and parental leave policies. This wasn't just about. I took a breath. Fourth, public acknowledgement, internally and externally, that my position was never legitimately vacant, and that this situation represents a corrected governance. Failure, not a routine transition. And fifth, I want you to reach out to the 4 other women executives who left under similar circumstances. Offer them the opportunity to discuss what happened with independent counsel and explore resolution options. The board members exchanged glances. Those are all acceptable, Jennifer said without hesitation. The board agrees. She stood and extended her hand. I shook it, feeling the weight of the gesture. Welcome back, Sarah. Officially and permanently. 2 months later, I stood in front of the entire product division for an all-hands meeting. My surgical scar healed completely, visible only if I looked for it in the mirror. A permanent reminder of the most vulnerable period of my life, and what I'd built from it. I know the past few months have been chaotic, I began. I want to address it directly. During my medical leave, decisions were made that violated policy and trust. The board took corrective action. More importantly, we've implemented structural changes so this can't happen to anyone else. I pulled up slides showing the new governance protocols, the updated medical leave protections, the gender equity audit results. But here's what matters most. This division's success has never been about one person. It's about all of you. Your innovation, your dedication, your expertise. What happened could have destroyed what we built. It didn't, because you continued delivering excellence despite the chaos. After the meeting, Dev approached me. Can I ask you something? Always. Why did you come back? You could have negotiated a huge settlement, started fresh somewhere else. Why stay? I'd been asked this question multiple times over the past weeks. My answer had evolved. Because leaving would have meant accepting that being human enough to need medical care makes you disposable, especially for women who already face constant scrutiny about commitment and priorities. I couldn't let that message stand. Not for me, and not for anyone else who might face this in the future. 3 months after that, Marcus left Titan for a position at a smaller firm. I didn't celebrate his departure. He'd been a symptom of Richard's dysfunction, not its cause. 6 months post-surgery, I was promoted to Executive Vice President with expanded authority over product and technology. The role came with appropriate compensation, equity, and genuine influence. But the real victory wasn't my title. It was the policy manual we created, establishing bulletproof protections for medical and parental leave, with explicit anti-discrimination provisions. It was watching Sarah and Dev get promoted into senior leadership. It was the culture survey showing dramatic improvement in women's confidence about advancement opportunities. It was leaving work at 5:30 p.m. to have dinner with Claire and Emma, knowing I'd built something sustainable that didn't require my martyrdom. One evening, about 8 months after everything changed, Emma asked about my scar. We were doing dishes together and my shirt had ridden up slightly. "Does it still hurt?" she asked. "No," I said honestly. "Not physically, but emotionally?" I considered this. It reminds me that needing help doesn't make you weak. That being vulnerable is part of being human. And that sometimes the smartest thing you can do is document everything and trust that facts will eventually matter. She dried a plate thoughtfully. "That's pretty deep, Mom." I laughed. Surgery gives you time to think. That night, I sent an email I'd been drafting for weeks. It went to the 4 women executives who'd left Titan under circumstances similar to mine. The message was brief. I wanted you to know that the pattern you experienced has been addressed. Governance changes have been implemented with specific protections for medical and parental leave. If you'd like to discuss what happened or explore resolution options, the board has authorized me to connect you with independent counsel. You deserved better. We all did. 3 responded within 24 hours. All 3 ended up reaching confidential settlements. 1. Melissa actually returned to Titan in a newly created VP role, finally getting the opportunity she'd been denied 3 years earlier. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, thank you. I know it's not the dramatic takedown narrative some revenge stories become. There was no viral email, no public meltdown, no spectacular confrontation. But sometimes the most powerful response isn't immediate retaliation. It's strategic documentation, clear communication, insisting on systemic change rather than individual punishment. Why? The truth is, they tried to erase me while I was recovering from surgery. They failed because I'd built something worth preserving, and I'd documented every step that proved it. If you've ever been pushed aside during a vulnerable time, particularly if you're a woman who's faced assumptions about your commitment because of medical or family needs, I want you to know something. Your value isn't determined by how easily others think they can replace you. It's determined by what you build, who you develop, and how you respond when tested. And if you found something valuable in my story, I'd appreciate if you'd like and subscribe. Share your experiences in the comments, especially if you've faced similar situations during medical leave. Your stories matter. They help others know they're not alone. Remember, sometimes being excluded from the table you built is exactly the catalyst you need to redesign the entire structure. Not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you.